The concepts in this analysis can be considered a bit heavy. Hey guys, so today we're going to jump into Vacant by Echoes. I want to first start by asking, how do you share your musical preferences with others? I often do music swaps with people I meet, where we send each other a playlist of around 10 songs to showcase where we're at currently with what we're listening to. A goal of this list is to give the other person a complete sense of the music preferences in a manageable listening session. I adore this format because I often feel isolated with my own music tastes, especially amongst my friends. It's also a lot more specific than me telling them I enjoy EDM. I think this is due to the fact that there aren't many sounds out there that I can even put in the same category. Mind you, I don't really like genres, but I'll get into that later. Echoes released Even Though You're Gone in 2018. I know it's been expressed in different interviews that this album is a letter breaking down a relationship with one person and the grieving process associated with that. When I hear this and I go back to my old breakup playlist, it's not surprising that I find some of these songs featured on it. The beautiful thing about music is that we have the ability to interpret it and take from it what we need at the time. While looking at my breakup list, I found In Flames, which I recently wrote about on Reddit in a whole other context last week. I was pleased to rediscover this addition to my old playlist because I feel it truly speaks for how dynamic music is and how our understanding of songs may change over time. There is no right way to interpret music, and I'm hoping that I really drive that point home as I dive into Vacant. As I've talked about before in writing, 2020 for me has been a lot of navigating my PTSD, and music has been very important. Today I'm focusing on Vacant because this song has been the most loud song for me on the album. This may be a weird way to use the term loud, but when I say loud, I mean the lyrics hit with so much raw emotion that it's hard to block it out. It's almost like an emotional wake-up call. Loud sounds have been important on my journey with PTSD because, like many others who experience it, one of the symptoms has been chronic emptiness. I would get many days where no matter how much I wanted to feel anything, everything just shut down. Music has been one of the first ways I was able to recognize my emotions were starting to operate again. There were times in my life when I would avoid loud songs, but I really have shifted into a place of seeking these songs out so I could feel these raw emotions. I'll jump into the song in a second, but I just want to explain one more aspect of the framing. As I mentioned before, I don't really like genres. I don't think that they capture exactly what songs are offering us. And the ideas of putting songs and artists into one category, it just doesn't really work with the way my brain operates. Music feels too complex to be generalized in this way. I feel very similar when I speak about emotions. It's hard for me to find a single word to really express what I'm feeling. I can't summarize what I'm feeling with a single word, but I probably can with a song, and I definitely can with a playlist. I have found that identifying labels for what I'm feeling is important for other people in my life and my relationships, and if they request that from me, then I end up kind of working backwards from the playlist to the songs to find a word that fits the whole playlist. That's just kind of how my brain handles that type of thing, and I'm sure that I'm not alone in that. I feel it's pretty common that people aren't really that great at labeling what they're feeling. So because of this, I have dozens of private playlists that serve the purpose of helping me label them. If you're someone who has a similar way of approaching this, I would recommend also trying this out because I found it very helpful, and I'll get into more of that a bit later. I approach Vacant in the context of my relationship with myself. If you've already listened to Vacant, and I hope you have before you watched this video, I can understand a cause for concern around the idea of delivering this messaging to yourself or myself. Although there's a lot of raw anger in this song, I think it's extremely powerful when applied to self. I view it as a wake-up call from myself to myself, and as we go through my entire framing, you will likely see that deep down behind all of the raw anger, this message is portrayed as a compassionate but much needed wake-up call. I'm going to rewarn you that the concepts in this analysis can be considered a bit heavy, so I apologize if that's unsettling for you. With that being said, I think that these types of feelings really need to be spoken about. It's hard to address them if people stay silent. This is a song to myself coming from a very powerful part of myself. I frame this as a song coming from the very small, fragile part of myself that holds my will to keep surviving, and more importantly, to keep living. This is the part of myself that often didn't really get acknowledged within my overall self, especially when we throw PTSD into the mix, and when I'm void of emotion, it's hard to feel any of those emotions, even the ones that are in place to kind of keep me going and alive. everything is numb, but through the numbness, sometimes we can overcome it from within, and when we experience those moments, they're extremely powerful. This song captures one of those moments for me. I've spent a great deal of time learning how to process and articulate these emotions in some written form and spoken form. This is important because by doing that, it becomes easier for me to replicate them as needed. Because I've documented my experiences with these moments, I can start training my brain to search for more of them and even replicate them. Like I said before, music is extremely important and powerful because my method of achieving that relies heavily on music. This song for me captures a very important moment from start to finish, that a piece of myself is gaining more and more strength as they confront the rest of myself about what has been going on. It's a letter to the rest of myself to help them notice this very important piece that was going unnoticed. It expresses all of the frustration with myself and then spans to express even vengeful thoughts about myself in an attempt to help me understand. Through all of these emotions, it's me trying to save myself that comes from a place of compassion. An almost desperate attempt at self-preservation and an attempt to give myself a wake-up call so that I can adjust my approach to life. A call to get on board with fixing these issues because we're starting to realize the impact they are having. Okay, now we're going to get into the specific lyrics. I've been waiting for you to get your mind right. This is a very good intro to this conversation, but most of that will be explained later in the song. We are pointing out that we gave ourselves time to sort this out before we initiated this confrontation, or perhaps that something has triggered this dialogue at this moment, whereas before we didn't feel it would be effective. Pour yourself into my skin until I can't see. This line is loaded. I have been approaching it from a few different angles, and the best angle I can see is me asking myself to take this conversation with as much empathy and active listening that we can manage to muster up. Listen so deeply to the subject matter we are diving into that we can feel it from the inside all the way out until we reach our skin. I absolutely love this because even stating that, we know that that's such a large demand. When our emotions are off, we know that feeling anything is a constant struggle, but we are asking ourselves to find the strength to do this. For the duration of this message, be as present as we can because this is important, and I think until I can't see, part of that reference is grounding. If anyone has experienced anything like dissociation, it's often portrayed with imagery of watching yourself from the outside and having no control. I like this reference of being so grounded in ourselves that we can't see ourselves from the outside anymore. Because we are so connected and ready to hear this message. We aren't just seeing, we're feeling it. We're feeling our own point of view. It's not just some faraway concept. It's real. You've been running for yourself for a while. This is a reference again to what I mentioned in the last line, the concept of being disconnected from self. But this is acknowledging it's been going on for a while. Waiting for the whole thing to catch fire. I think this line captures places of self-sabotage. I also think it captures aspects of suicide ideation that aren't always spoken about. I've touched on this in previous writing. It isn't direct, immediate feelings of impulses to die. It's a lot of framing around, oh, well, I've been destructive, I've been reckless, if it harms you, whatever, I don't care. It's that lack of care for life versus that compulsion to purge yourself. I think these feelings are especially important to note and recognize because there are clear steps in addressing them. They also tend to be the thoughts we are able to safely deconstruct compared to the thoughts that have thrown us into full crisis mode and into a space where we aren't really capable of giving ourselves the internal attention we desperately need. You think that if you burn down, you'll be fine. This is a similar premise to the previous line. This illustrates feelings of feeling better off if that's the outcome. Not deliberately setting the fire, but feeling fine with that being the repercussion of the flames. This one is fairly important to me. I tend to approach these feelings with avoidance. Avoidance tends to go hand in hand with lies, especially lies to self. I feel this meme right here really captures this plus the last two lines. We tell ourselves it's fine so that it becomes easier to tell others that we're fine too. This line really articulates the feeling of being fed up with not being present. I'll get more into this in a future line. It all kind of builds on each other. You'll understand soon. I love this line so much. I will try my best to express why, but honestly, this is difficult to put into words to express. So, imagine someone choking on teeth that aren't there. If someone were to choke on teeth, they would have to be solid. In a dissociated state, we don't feel ourselves, we don't feel our teeth. In order to choke on our teeth, they would have to become a solid form we are aware of. So we're basically hoping that we sense the presence within ourselves and it impacts us in a way that impacts our ability to exist in that capacity. But that's not all. As I said before, we often lie to ourselves about how we're feeling. So it becomes easier to deliver those same lies to others so that they don't focus on our pain. I picture the teeth we expose through fake smiles. In the same loaded line, we are hoping something shifts in us and causes us to choke as we exhibit those fake smiles. The teeth we are exposing in these smiles are vacant of representing our actual emotions. It's a hope that one day it becomes too much and we realize we need to address it. Like I said, I love this line. It's all packaged in something that sounds like an aggressive threat. But when you unpack the message, it's again from a place of concern for self and self-understanding around knowing that we are void of emotion. So, it will take something like this to actually jolt them back on. No space in your broken veins for me. We're getting really emo in here, I know. I also love this line. Veins are lifelines in our body. This is an acknowledgement that those lines are damaged and or at risk. We need to mend them, but they are so broken right now that we don't have the ability to let in what would help mend them. We can't feel them. We aren't there. This is my favorite line in the entire song. It wraps up all of the other metaphors in previous lines. Until we reach this point in the song, we can't fully grasp all of the other layers of the other lines. If you read every other line, you can follow it up with this one. What I most love about this line is this is an effective avenue we can use to deliver this message to ourselves. We might not be able to feel or understand the other things in this song, but we know that we are empty, and knowing that we are empty in itself is such a specific experience, because feeling empty is a paradox. Okay. This concept is very hard to articulate. Again, I apologize in advance because this gets a bit meta. Here we go. You're experiencing a lack of emotion. One day, you eventually reach a point where you realize you are experiencing a lack of emotion. What is your emotional response to noticing a lack of emotion? Is it sadness? Because that may quickly shift to happiness and appreciation because through being upset about experiencing nothing, you're now exhibiting something, and that response would solve the issue. If it doesn't solve the issue, your response to lack of emotion is likely more lack of emotion, which brings you to a place of great understanding that you're not feeling anything. What do you do now? Alternatively, instead of feeling, because you've already figured out you can't do that, you may start to conceptualize what you should be feeling if your emotions are operating. It's the entire logic part of your brain driving the process of trying to draw on what you would be feeling if your emotions worked based on your past experiences. By this notion, your emotions are operating from a place of logic. That logical place you operate from is key to navigating life while you're feeling empty. If you can hypothesize how you would feel if your emotions worked, you can express those notions to yourself and others to navigate with very specific perceived efficiency. As I stated in a previous line, we lie to ourselves about how we're feeling, but that isn't entirely accurate. We tell ourselves what we'd be feeling based on these hypotheses. Because we feel nothing, all we have to reference is concepts of emotion we think we'd feel in their place. At some point in this process, you will probably decide that you want to make the shift from trying to logically decide what you should be feeling into a place where you're trying to figure out how to turn these emotions back on so that you can feel them authentically. It's probably a similar place in yourself that is delivering the message in the song. How do you make the shift if you don't have emotions driving the urgency to turn them back on? If this is your first time navigating this experience, it won't exist in your past experiences, so you can't draw from them to reach this outcome logically. If your emotions are off, you don't even have the ability to be concerned about the lack of emotion, because the lack of concern probably doesn't exist in your past experiences. You would have to reach a place of concern somewhere in the logic side of your brain in order to even reach a place of troubleshooting how to turn them back on. How do you decide you want to turn them back on? You generally don't. I've spent so much time on this concept in my head, and generally it goes in circles. We can't rely on our lived experiences alone to get to a place of knowing to turn them back on. By this notion, they aren't turned off because we intentionally don't want to feel, though this may be why they were originally shut off. they are still turned off because we aren't aware that we want them back on. We are so distant from ourselves that we can't process the feeling of wanting them back on. I know this is a lot. I'm almost done. I hope you're still with me. A little bit more to go. If you can't rely on internal factors and experiences to guide you to the decision to make the shift, you'll have to rely on external ones. The problem with external factors guiding you is you don't have control of them. You can't ask for them. They just appear in our lives. What I've found, though, fortunately, is that external factors can bypass the need to want to turn them back on, and instead help ground us in our emotions, turning them back on at the same time. Sometimes we face an external experience that jolts us into these feelings so that we feel something. Start noticing through external factors, you aren't in your logic brain and you are actually feeling something. This can be tricky because if it's something in line with your hypotheses you created that are generally very accurate, it may even feel artificial. We may not even be aware that they have actually switched to operating in a place of emotion. For this reality to really sink in, we need an external factor to express to us our own feeling of being empty. In that exact moment, by feeling concerned about feeling empty, we no longer feel empty in that capacity. Similar to what I expressed when I said the feeling of knowing you're empty may result in sadness, and because sadness is an emotion, it negates the feeling of being empty. What does that have to do with this line? What I just expressed is essentially an emotional paradox, and this line creates that paradox. When we hear, "I know that you're empty," it's this process I just outlined in the blink of an eye. Once this emotion is sparked in us, we can work backward through the song and slowly start to understand what we are saying to ourselves. Because of that spark, our mind can start processing our response to feeling empty, and start working on ways to negate that in other capacities. It makes the concept of empty multidimensional in the sense that we can now understand that there are different portions of this feeling. By making this connection, we have figured out how to negate this feeling of emptiness, and that can be applied to other areas. The split-second realization that you're feeling empty can be utilized by a piece of self expressing the song's message to help get all of the other messages in here across. It's urgency, compassion, and action all in one very loaded, yet somehow simple line, fulfilling the request of the second line in the song as we process it. Emotions can be overwhelming, but by this experience happening, we now have a reference point in our brain if our emotions were to shut down again. This allows an avenue to troubleshoot in logic mode. Every time emotions shut down and we need to troubleshoot in logic mode, we have new scenarios recorded in our brains to access as reference points, giving us higher odds at turning the emotions back on and understanding the value of having them on in the first place. We also gain access to potential understanding of our own patterns and emotions shutting off and on. Okay. Hope that made sense. I know it was a lot. You don't even look the same with your brand new eyes. This references the gradual realization I mentioned from the line we just went over. That line truly sinking in, because every time it's repeated, I view it as another dose of reality, really driving home the connection to that feeling. Brand New Eyes references the new viewpoint of this connection. And this is the notion that that connection is the driving force getting us out of the overall express situation. And you drain the light out of yourself and now you can't see. This references the newfound awareness of knowing that our way of living is essentially killing us by draining all the light from us. And now you can't see is another multidimensional notion. The obvious one being that we aren't aware of the light leaving, but that would likely be phrased differently as we are currently talking about the present. In the second line, the song references, "Pour yourself into my skin until you can't see." That was referenced as a request, and it reaffirms that the requested process of grounding ourselves in emotions is truly happening. At the same time, it is also referencing that our old views of our old way of living, especially operating from inauthentic emotions populated by our logic brain, isn't even an option anymore. This part of us, the part of us delivering the message, our will to live, has taken control. We are essentially taking the will to live and overpowering the will to just exist. The progression of our awareness of our situation is feeling our will to live by using this newfound ability to feel again. And it keeps going and going and going, and it progresses through the song until it finishes. If you don't believe me, go listen to it again. hope you enjoyed my take on this song. Like I said, it has been very helpful. I will end by again bringing up my playlists. I mentioned my private Spotify playlists that I create. These lists are still very incomplete because I'm still adding songs to them, but as songs come up that bring on emotions, I try to place them with other songs that give me similar feelings, and then they get a title. I'm not going to link the private playlists from Spotify, but maybe I'll make them on YouTube, but I will definitely put them in this video. You can probably see them like right now. I ask that if you're going to recommend songs to me, that's awesome, but please don't recommend, like if you recommend them for a playlist, I'm not going to put them on specific playlists unless I've approved them for those playlists, because it's about my emotions and you don't get to. It's my thing. It's my playlist. You can't have it, but you can have it. You can't add to it. So, the first one is called Valid. I place all of the songs on here that deliver very specific emotions, but it's also a variety of emotions, so it's just kind of like super chaotic, but the thing that is the same about all of them is that they're all valid emotions. So, as you can see, this is the list. And then, of course, I created a playlist called Empty, and this is a playlist I use if I'm starting to notice that I'm feeling empty, which is something I've been able to notice based on situations like I described in this song, where I was noticing it because something brought it on, and then I was able to reapply those to figure out different ways that I can signal to myself that that's how I'm feeling. But when that happens, sometimes I still can't turn them on myself, but like this song, it gives me that kind of snap back into reality. Basically, I know that these songs have invoked emotions in me before when I've been in those states, so the hope is that it'll happen again, and it's not foolproof, it won't always happen, but it's just one of the things in my toolbox as I go through this whole journey. Hope you enjoy my take on this song. If you do, consider liking and subscribing or whatever I'm supposed to say about that, because I want to grow my platform or something. I would like to just add a quick disclaimer that although I have taken very basic college courses on mental health, I am not a professional. When I speak about mental health, I am speaking about my experiences with mental health, but that does not replace a professional or medication. What I talk about in my video can possibly help you navigate and frame your own experiences, but what I talk about does not replace therapy, other mental health professional services, most definitely does not replace medication if you're on medication, and if you are struggling, please don't stay silent. Please go to a professional, or at least to a friend who can help you get to a professional, but don't sit in silence. Really, we're all in this together, and I hope that you enjoyed this content. See ya.